in Baltimore, and I was headed out to the Combine in Indianapolis this week, but just called an audible and decided, on jet lag and whatnot, that it might be good to be home. It feels like I haven't been home since before I saw this guy last, and that was in Houston, where we spent the week together at Super Bowl 51. I know we caught a little post-game tail end of that, and still a month later, Chris Pica, it is kind of inconceivable that the Falcons blew a 28-3 lead. I don't know at what point we're going to stop talking about that. You live down in Atlanta. Give me a little, month later, how that feels down there in with Flowery Branch, correct?
Yeah. The fans here, from the people that you see, you still see a lot of NFC champions shirts and things like that being worn around. I mean, I think the true fans, the fans have been with this franchise for a very long time, are certainly still with them. Those who may have jumped on the bandwagon here over the course of the season and into the Super Bowl run, I can't even conceive of it. I sat in the workroom at the stadium in Houston, Energy Stadium, during the game, and it was no real sense that this was coming. And even into the fourth quarter, you start to think, well, okay, there's a chance here. And I can only imagine what bars and restaurants in Atlanta were like, and I'm sure everybody looked like Arthur Blank on the sidelines in the last 6 minutes, just mouth dropped open, just watching this happen. But for those of us who've been around it for a while and watched Tom Brady for a while and the Patriots, we've seen this movie before. We saw it in Super Bowl 36. We saw it in Super Bowl 38. And unfortunately, for the Falcons, their defense was completely gassed, and now they have to pick up the pieces. And they've done a lot of shuffling on the coaching staff. Surprisingly, maybe to outsiders, maybe not to those who've been around the franchise. I'm sure Arthur Blank, the owner, was very embarrassed by what happened and probably wanted some changes made. And the Falcons weren't afraid to make those changes in the coaching staff. And so what the 2017 Falcons look like is certainly very much up for grabs. But for them and the other 31 clubs, that process starts with the Combine.
I couldn't stop thinking about, writing a book and having a parade and, all the ring ceremony, all the things, Joe Flacco being a decorated guy now with a pelt and all that. 1 yard, if not for 1 yard in Super Bowl 47 with the Ravens, how different would the 49ers be had they gotten a yard and won that game, right? Like, Jim Harbaugh would still be in San Francisco, right? I mean, John Harbaugh might not be in Baltimore. I don't know. But, things change on that. For the why in the road that the Falcons go back to Atlanta, to your point, without a championship that should be on the wall there. The Patriots go back and have yet another parade and another duck boat ride and all that nonsense and Gronkowski and all that. It is a different path. For the Falcons, I do worry for a franchise like that. We saw what it did to the Panthers last year. But when the road goes in that direction, I can't imagine. I mean, every charity golf tournament Matt Ryan goes out to, every single person that walks up, you don't even know what to say to those people. I don't know what I would say to Dan Quinn if I ran into him in Indianapolis this week.
Yeah, I don't know what you can say. I mean, they had it in their hands and it went away. But as I wrote at the time late that night, a game like that has effects on your franchises in ways you don't even realize at that moment.
I think the same thing for the Orioles, by the way. I mean, Buck is, we're not even 3 days into spring training here, and Buck is, we're not going to talk about last year anymore. Oh, yes, we are. Maybe you're not, but we are. And until you get back to a wild card game and have Zach Britton come into the game, and, they're running Jimenez out, it's... they're trying to sanitize Jimenez through all of this because they feel like they might be able to get 160 innings out of him. The excuses that need to be made when you fail and we're just going to have amnesia about it. No one has amnesia. They can talk about it, but, every deed is remembered, I think, until such point where you get past it. I mean, Tom Brady's last act and Belichick was Manningham and Tyree until they won again, right?
Well, you have to do, I think New England's very good at, Belichick always saying, we're on to the next team, you're on to the next game. And you have to do that in some respects. You do have to bury the past and try to get going again. But, again, the effects of a loss like Atlanta shared, well, now you have a coaching staff shuffle. You've lost your offensive coordinator. I mean, there's a lot of things there. And I remember very vividly being at Super Bowl 38 in Houston, the last Super Bowl in Houston. Carolina's on the doorstep of winning a Super Bowl, or at least maybe getting into overtime against New England. They have a kickoff go out of bounds, and it gave the New England a short field. The Patriots come down to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the Steve Smiths and the Mike Minters live with that every day of their lives, right?
Exactly right, because you don't know whether you'll get another shot at that. You don't. You think you do. Every losing team walks off that field and says, we're going to be back here next year. And it's incredibly hard to do. It's incredibly hard for the winning team to do it back-to-back years. It's even harder for the losing team because you've expended so much energy and gotten so close. And you have to get, and as a franchise, as a front office, you have to get everybody on the same page again and start doing the exact same work that you did a year ago, knowing how close you were and knowing that you don't know whether you get back or not, but you've got to go through the same conditioning drills, the same off-season workouts. You make little changes here and there, but you've got to get everybody on the same page. And everybody looked at Carolina 2 years after 2 years ago and said, hey, Carolina's built for the long haul here. They're going to get back.
Well, I think the Cowboys have some issues, too. I mean, when you're the best team, as the Panthers were 2 years ago, and you just ease through and you're 15-1 and you don't win, I mean, for the Cowboys, you're 13-3 and you don't win. Do you think you're going to win 14 next year? I mean, that's a very difficult thing for every team that isn't the team that wins. And here we are again talking about the Patriots being the team that won, and they will be the team that's favored when we kick off again 6 months from now.
Yeah, and I also look at, sometimes you get caught up in the regular season record. We saw this in basketball with Golden State having, breaking the record with 73 wins in the NBA, getting to the finals and had it in their hands, and then they weren't able to finish the job. I mean, the Indians were up 3-1, couldn't finish the job. It's a great lesson that you've got to keep going, and as much as a regular season is important for seeding, the main job is the 3 or 4 games you get in the postseason in the NFL to get to the Super Bowl and win it. It's not expending as much energy as you do during the regular season. It's managing that and making sure that you're ready to go and healthy for the postseason. And it tells you how hard it is to do, and it also tells you how incredible the Patriots' run has been to do this constantly, to play in a lot of conference championship games and Super Bowls. In this era, in the salary cap era, that's incredibly hard to do. And so the teams that get there and get close, you've got to seize on an opportunity. If you're the general manager and you've got a potential player move that might put you, over the top, you learn to make those moves and you learn to be aggressive, because sometimes standing pat doesn't get you back to where you want to be, and then you're sitting there holding the bag a second year, wondering why we couldn't have repeated our success from the year before. And I think, especially in the NFC, we've seen a lot of that. The AFC's been the same teams. It's been the Patriots, the Steelers, the Ravens in the last 10 years. The NFC's been more wide open with teams getting there, but it's a great lesson to general managers and coaches. You have to be aggressive. You have to make changes. You can't stand pat with the group that you have. You always have to change something up. And I think maybe that was the reasoning for what the Falcons did on the coaching staff was, we're not where we want to be defensively, and they weren't. So they make changes on the defense. They've got the offensive coordinator leaves. So they're going to be a different group coming into this year. While you understand the lessons of what happened a year ago, you've got to move forward, and you're going to have a newer group, and a lot of people who weren't part of that team will be a part of this team coming up in 2017.
Well, we're about to get into some purple conversation. Chris Pica of Baltimore, my oldest media pal and the communications director for the Bahamas Bowl, as well as the Pro Football Writers of America. And, of course, running around, you're doing a bunch of college basketball. You do a bunch of college football as well on the production side. You can follow Chris at Blog and Tackle out on Twitter, and as well a WNST contributor here for many, many years. Chris, for the Ravens, we usually go out to the Combine. I don't know that there's much to be gleaned from the Combine as much as there's beer to be drank and steak to be eaten and cocktail sauce that opens up your nose down there on Maryland Avenue in downtown Indianapolis. But for the Ravens and for these next 6 to 8 weeks and for whatever they did down in Jupiter with Steve Bisciotti and putting it all together, the same group of people are pretty much involved in this, including Joe Flacco at the quarterback position. The decisions they're going to make for cuts later on in the week, the free agency situation and how much cap space they're going to clear, where they're going to spend it, what's going to happen to Brandon Williams, what's going to happen to Rick Wagner over the next 10, 14 days is really going to lead up to this draft at the end of April where, when the Ravens have made hay and when they've been a perennial double-digit win team, even as a wild card all of those years, we haven't had enough playoff games here in Baltimore during this glorious run, quite frankly, over the last 2 decades. But the draft is, where they've really lost their way, and you get that no closer than when Matt Elam is, off selling weed down in Miami Beach over the weekend, a former number 1 pick that should be a part of the solution, hasn't been a part of any of the solutions around here, and the Ravens spent 3.5 months preparing for a draft, 4 years ago after the Super Bowl, and he was the best they could do, and quite frankly, and they would all agree with this, that's not good enough.
No, it isn't, and again, the process that you go through is a constant process. It's not that the college scouting process begins now.
Sure.
The college scouting process starts during the college season. You've got scouts at games throughout the country. You're sending guys to watch games.
Well, dude, that's why I write books about Joe Douglas and Eric DeCosta and Joe Ortiz running around up at Delaware, chasing Joe Flacco around when, they really wanted Matt Ryan, quite frankly, right? I mean, those stories don't come out till 8 years later when you win a championship, but that is scouting. That's how it was done. I mean, they fell in love with Ray Lewis. They fell in love with John Ogden instead of Lawrence Phillips. And, that's what's built this franchise. But, when you fall in love with Matt Elam, and Sergio Kindle and those guys don't wind up being able to play, you wind up drafting 16th and having your owner talk about pitchforks being out.
Well, it is difficult. And you do a lot of stuff. You do a lot of intelligence gathering, a lot of reconnaissance. You talk to position coaches, you talk to their high school coaches, you talk to
janitors,
people that they interact with at the schools, and sometimes, and again, I'll point it to a situation that happened to a player that was already in the league. Michael Vick, who knew he was fighting dogs. Okay, the Falcons
certainly none of you that were working there at the time, right?
No, none of us were aware of that. Security wasn't aware of that. I mean, Michael had some issues, but not anything that anyone was able to realize. And obviously, Matt Elam had some things going on that people didn't know about. And then, a lot of times, teams will quietly talk to campus security at places to try to see if the person's had any problems that didn't make the newspapers, and just trying to get a sense of what they're in for. And sometimes you just miss. I mean, that's. You can miss one or two. When you start missing more than one or two, especially on the high-profile first and second-day guys, that's when scouts' jobs are in jeopardy and personnel guys' jobs are in jeopardy.
In your opinion, is the Ravens situation closer to being blown up than we can imagine? I mean, if something were, and look, on paper right now, they're not a very good football team. I mean, they're not where they need to be. I mean, the Steve Smith situation, the free agency situation, the losses they've had. I mean, Zach Orr, who was, quite frankly, if he wasn't their best player last year, he certainly was in the conversation of top 3, and he's not coming back for sure. Jimmy Smith's a question mark. They have so many question marks right now that it's hard to today, during the combine, look and say, I'm going to find a way they're going to win 11 or 12 games next year without a lot of luck and a lot of great decision-making, which they're certainly capable of. I mean, John Harbaugh's a hell of a coach. Over the course of the body of work, Eric, Joe, and Ozzie have been, I don't want to say unparalleled, but, at the top of their industry. This is the time. This is when the fire's getting hot for them, because I really do believe, given the tread on the tires of all of these guys, this is going to be a very, very different organization if this team doesn't make the playoffs.
Well, I had a general manager once say that you have to manage expectations in your own building, okay? And again, I'm not going to speculate on the Ravens meetings that they had down in Florida, but let's in an overall, let's take what that could have been. Those meetings are basically an opportunity for everybody to speak freely in a room and talk about whatever it is that you need to go over, whether that's a salary cap situation, whether that's your player situation, where are we as an organization, and you basically put a lot of things on the table. And if you have very good communication in your building and you feel like you can speak freely with ownership, and ownership can certainly speak freely with Ozzie and those people, you have that exchange of ideas and you manage the expectations. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, the fans expect this team to be double-digit wins. They want to be double-digit wins back in the playoffs and go deep, and it's obviously the stated goal of ownership. But when they look at it, honestly, on the boards, in the room, what is the expectation, the quiet expectation that they're telling ownership, and what is ownership telling them back? As far as
when they get in the room down in Jupiter, I mean, they're a bunch of bright guys. I think they realize they're not as close to beating the Patriots as maybe they feel like they are when they're on the field and the Patriots are kicking the ball around up in Foxborough. And they literally had a chance to win that night, and not for how they played, but quite frankly for how the Patriots played. But, and the Steelers thing is so close, right? I mean, the Steeler Christmas night game was about an angle on the arm of Antonio Brown being the difference. I mean, you could talk yourself into thinking, we almost got into the playoffs. We almost drew a home game. We were that close to going to Foxborough and having a chance to do it all. You could talk yourself into that, but in reality, given the players that they've lost, the players they stand at risk of losing, they're not close right now. And maybe it'll be borne out wrong in next December when they're 9-3 entering the month or something. But right now, it's hard to envision that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and then.
Well, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think that's why you have to have total honesty in those meetings so that you can decide and sit there as a group and say, okay, these are the players that we're sure that here's who we're going to cut in order for salary cap room. These are the players we think we can keep, and we're going to have to recruit hard to keep them. These are guys that we can expend some energy on, but more than likely they're going to take better offers, and we're okay with that. And you start really pounding at that roster, and you begin to look at, okay, where are we looking in the draft? What types of players are we looking for? What do we need? What are the short-term needs, and what are the long-term needs? Where are we not only in 2017, but where are we in 2018? What depth do we need to have for guys that are probably going to leave us after the 2017 season? So the process isn't a one-year process when you're down there having those meetings. You're talking about 1, 2, 3 years ahead so that you have the depth of players. And as Billick famously put it, next man up, and every coach says that. You have to have those people in place too, not only your starters on your day one and day two draft guys, but you've got to start building the bottom of the roster, the guys that are going to move up into positions in 1 or 2 years are going to help you win. And, you hope that your scouts go out there and do really good work and they grade players very well and you get an opportunity to do it. I mean, it's, only one team wins at the end of the year. Another team sits there like Atlanta and wonders what if, and the other 30 had a shot or didn't have a shot depending on how their year went. So you have to make those plans and be very honest. And again, the Ravens are never going to say what privately they think where this team could be at the end of the year. But your general manager, your head coach, and your owner better be on the same page there and manage those expectations, because what you don't want, and I've seen it happen, where an owner thinks this is a 13-win team and a team winds up winning 9. That gets people out of a job real fast.
Last thing for you, Chris, because I'm not going out to the Combine this week, and I think interesting teams, the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm going to continue to talk about that because therein lies the rub. 13 wins, they were the best team, they're young. The expectations are that the kid at quarterback's going to be better next year. The kid at running back's going to be better next year. The offensive line's going to be better next year. That's a lot of expectation in a place where it's already, larger than life and combustible because of all things, Jerry. Now they're going to deal off Romo and try to figure that thing out over the next couple of weeks. But you can also be buried under by those kinds of expectations because conversely to teams like the Ravens that underperformed, or Houston or Denver that won 9 games or whatever this year, and they're sort of in that no man's land. Bigger things are expected out of the Cowboys, and we haven't talked about that since Jimmy Johnson or maybe the old Oklahoma coach 25 years ago. It's been a long time since the Cowboys are expected to win 12 or 13 games.
And you look at guys like Prescott, Elliott, and tremendous players this year, but every team in the league eventually begins to figure you out. And it's the adjustments that you make after the first year that kind of keeps you moving forward. And again, they overachieved. No one saw what the Cowboys did this year coming. And certainly it was because they had so much talent right off the bat, quarterback and running back. And their offensive line was probably the best in the game, and they probably deserved a better fate than they got in the playoffs.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about them over the next 6 weeks because they were the one team, like the Ravens, need to be that healed themselves on draft day last year, right? Like, they go out there, Jerry parks the big bus with the star on it in front of the place with the wine and the steak and the cocktail sauce, and they're trying to find the miracle that's going to make them a 13-win team and add some relevance. The Ravens are out in Indianapolis this week trying to find 2 football players that are going to come in next year and sack quarterbacks, make plays, score touchdowns, whatever it is, make blocks. And the Cowboys managed to do that in the draft last year. So that is for the dreamers. That's what the draft's about, right?
I look at Dallas a little bit differently in my work with the Pro Football Writers because I manage the All-Pro voting and the Rookie of the Year and the All-Rookie teams and the All-Conference teams. Jerry Jones was our Executive of the Year last year. Okay, he was voted Executive of the Year by our membership last year because the Cowboys over the last 2 or 3 years, much as the Ravens have done for a good long period under Ozzie Newsome, it wasn't just a one-year thing with Dallas. Dallas had good drafts and had several players in the all-rookie teams going back 3 seasons. And those guys have all matured. That's been the difference in where they were this year. They got the final 2 pieces that they needed in some respects. Elliott and Prescott were finishing pieces, and Prescott wasn't even supposed to be the finishing piece. It was supposed to be Tony Romo. And it would have been very interesting to see, had Romo been healthy, where they would have been this year. What the Cowboys would have done with Romo and Elliott as opposed to Prescott and Elliott. So they had some finishing pieces and had a little bit of luck. And, the Ravens have been so good for so long, especially in the later rounds, getting that depth and getting those guys that are maybe a little bit overlooked and are hard workers and grinders and make themselves into good position players and become important pieces to it. When you begin to miss on those mid-round and late-round guys, then you don't have the depth. And now you start looking for home runs at the top of the draft. The Cowboys weren't necessarily looking for home runs at the top of the draft. They already had the base reset. And I think to your point, that's where the worry with the Ravens is. It's not so much the top, because you want to hit on those anyway. It's the fact that the base is shaky right now, and that's where the Ravens really have to shore that up. And in order to do that, where is this team going to be at the end of the season? After this year, where are they going to be? A 9-win team? Are they a 10-win team? Are they 8-8 again? And what kind of changes is that going to bring? And it'll be, like I said, we'll never know. But I'd love to know what Bisciotti is telling them, what his expectations are, knowing where the Ravens sit salary-wise, roster-wise, and where they think this team's going to be a year from now. What's it going to take for them not to make major changes? The Cowboys built the base. The Ravens have always built the base. And again, the difference between the 2 teams right now is the Ravens base is a lot shakier than the one in Dallas.
He is Chris Pica. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter. And, of course, Mount St. Joe and Loyola. Not many guys can say Mount St. Joe and Loyola, but your Loyola was the college, not the high school, right?
That's correct.
You were anti-Don, pro-Greyhound.
Anti-Don, pro-Greyhound, and just off the kilter for a second. I mean, a great winner by the St. Joe basketball, wrestling, and hockey teams and track.
Oh, here comes the Gale love. Okay, go ahead.
It's been a great winter time over in Irvington, and with the Baltimore Catholic League tournament coming up. So this it's been fun. But yes, Gales and Greyhounds for me.
Well, the Gales and Terps now are getting together too, so
Right.
that'll be an interesting thing. Hey, Terps have their own problems. We're trying to figure them out over the next 10 days here, right?
No doubt.
Be well.
Thank you.
You got it. There he goes, Chris Pica, blog and tackle.